The silence in this big, old house was a heavy thing. I moved through it like a ghost, fluffing pillows and dusting surfaces that never seemed to stay clean. It was his father's house, still, in every creak of the floorboard and scent of old leather. And I was the curator, the caretaker of a memory that wasn't entirely mine. And then there was Liam. At 22, he was a quiet storm contained in a 6'2" frame. He'd come in from work, his dark hair damp with sweat, his t-shirt stretched across a back broadened by labor. He'd fold himself into the armchair and the silence would change. It would become charged, watchful. I'd feel his presence like a physical touch, a hum in the air that made the fine hairs on my arms stand up. I used to look at him and see the boy I'd met when he was 18, all awkward angles and sullen silence. Now, I saw the man. I saw the way his jaw tightened when he was thinking, the surprising gentleness in his large, calloused hands when he'd fix a loose hinge on a cabinet. I saw the way he'd look at me sometimes, a quick, dark flicker of a gaze that was anything but filial. It shamed me. It thrilled me. The day of the leak, with the rain lashing the windows, I saw him shirtless for the first time since he was a teenager. It was different. Water slicked his dark hair and traced paths over the hard planes of his chest and shoulders. When he moved the bookcase, muscles cording in his back and arms, my mouth went dry. It was a raw, physical reaction that coiled low in my belly. When I reached out with the towel, my fingers trembling, the heat of his skin beneath the cool rain was a shock. He went perfectly still, and in that stillness, I felt a question so potent it stole my breath. "Elise," he'd said, my name a low rumble that vibrated right through me. After that, the careful walls we'd built began to crumble. Every casual touch felt deliberate. Every shared glance felt like a secret. The night I broke down over the photo albums, the grief was a suffocating weight. But his weight on the sofa next to me was solid, real. When his big, rough hand enveloped mine, it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like an anchor. And when I looked up and saw the look in his eyes, not pity, but a fierce, shared understanding, something broke open inside me. He sees me, I thought. Not just his father's wife. Not just the stepmother. He sees me. Elise. The woman who was lonely, who was afraid, who was still alive. The night the power went out, the darkness felt like a confession. The fire painted his features in gold and shadow, and the wine warmed my veins, loosening the final locks on my heart. We talked, really talked, and with every word, the chasm between who we were supposed to be and who we were widened. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for 2 years," I told him. It was the truest thing I'd said aloud. "So breathe," he said. And then he touched me. Not my hand, but my face. His fingers, rough from work, were impossibly gentle as they brushed my cheek. It was a question. It was an answer. Every nerve ending in my body came alive, screaming in a chorus of yes. "Liam, we can't." The protest was a whisper, a ghost of the obligation I was supposed to feel. Why? His challenge was quiet, absolute. Because of a title? Because of what people would think. He's gone, Elise. And we're alive. Alive. The word shattered me. He moved closer, and the heat from his body was a brand. I could smell him, clean sweat, the night air, something uniquely male and uniquely Liam. My head was spinning, my heart a wild drum against my ribs. This was madness. It was a line we could never uncross. But when he said, "I've been going crazy for months. Watching you," all the madness made a terrible, beautiful sense. His confession was my absolution. When his lips found mine, it wasn't a gentle exploration. It was a claiming, and it was a homecoming. It was deep and desperate, a release of all the tension, the longing, the unspoken words that had filled this house for months. His arms wrapped around me, pulling my body against his chest, and I melted. My hands slid up his arms, feeling the powerful shift of muscle, and tangled in his dark, thick hair. The world, with all its rules and judgments, fell away. There was no past, no future. There was only this man, the overwhelming, undeniable rightness of being in his arms. The last thought I had before I surrendered completely was that I wasn't his stepmother anymore. I was just a woman, finally waking up. The world did not fall away. It sharpened until all that existed was the rough wool of the rug beneath my knees, the frantic drum of my own heart, and the devastating warmth of his mouth on mine. It was he who broke the kiss, pulling back as if stung. The air rushed back in, cold and shocking. We stared at each other, chests heaving, the fire popping in the silence like gunshots. "What are we doing?" I whispered, the words raw. His expression, which had been soft with desire, hardened into a mask of horror. He scrambled back, putting a foot of space between us that felt like a mile. "God, Elise. I'm sorry." He stood up so quickly, he was almost unsteady, snatching his shirt from the floor. He didn't look at me as he pulled it on, his movements jerky. This is wrong. It's my father's house." The words were a physical blow, shattering the fragile, intimate world we'd built over the past hour. Shame, hot and immediate, washed over me. He was right. Of course, he was right. "I should go," he muttered, already heading for the door. I'll go to Matt's for a couple of days." And just like that, he was gone. The front door clicked shut with a finality that echoed through the empty house. I was left alone on the rug, my skin still humming from his touch, my lips still swollen from his kiss, surrounded by the ghost of what we had almost done. The next 36 hours were a special kind of torture. The house was louder in its silence, every creak a reminder of his absence. I cleaned obsessively, trying to scrub away the memory of his hands on my skin, the scent of him on the air. I avoided the living room, the scene of the crime. My phone sat silent. I both dreaded and longed for a text, a call, anything. What would it say? "I'm sorry, let's forget it?" Or "I can't stop thinking about you." I didn't know which possibility terrified me more. When he returned on the second evening, the sound of his key in the lock made my heart leap into my throat. I was in the kitchen, pretending to be engrossed in a recipe book. He walked in, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked tired, shadows under his eyes. "Elise," he said, his voice neutral. "Liam." I kept my eyes on the page, seeing nothing but a blur of text. "How is Matt's?" "Fine." He dropped his bag by the door. The air between us was thick with everything unsaid. He moved to the sink to get a glass of water, and as he passed behind me, I caught his scent, soap and cold night air. My body reacted instantly, a traitorous flush of heat. He stood at the counter, his back to me, drinking his water. The tension was a live wire, stretching taut between us. I could feel the weight of his unspoken words, his internal battle, as if it were my own. Finally, he set the glass down with a quiet thud. He didn't turn around. "I tried," he said to the window, his voice low and strained. "I stayed away. I thought about never coming back. But I can't. I can't unfeel it." My breath hitched. I closed the recipe book, my hands trembling. He turned then, his dark eyes blazing with a desperate honesty. "It's not going away, is it?" It wasn't a question. It was a shared confession. The careful distance, the 2 days of separation, had solved nothing. It had only distilled the wanting, purified it into something even more potent and undeniable. I shook my head, a single, helpless motion. "No," I breathed. "It's not." That was all the confirmation he needed. He crossed the room in 3 swift strides, but he didn't touch me. He stopped just inches away, his gaze dropping to my lips, then back to my eyes, asking one last, silent question. This time, there was no hesitation. This time, the pull was too strong, the current we had tried to resist too powerful. I gave him a slow, deliberate nod. And as he closed the final distance, his hands coming up to frame my face with a reverence that made my eyes sting with tears, I knew we were lost. We had tried to do the right thing, and it had only led us right back here, to the edge of the precipice. This time, we would jump together. The morning after his return was a study in quiet tension. Sunlight streamed into the kitchen, too bright, exposing every detail. The way his hand trembled slightly as he poured coffee. The way I couldn't meet his eyes for more than a second. We moved around each other like planets in an unstable orbit, careful not to touch. "It's supposed to rain today," he said, his voice too loud in the quiet kitchen. "I should bring the plants in from the patio," I replied, my words too quick. This was the new reality. The house, once a sanctuary of polite distance, was now a crucible of unspoken desire and gnawing guilt. We had crossed a line, and the chasm it created was wider and more terrifying than the silence that preceded it. The breaking point came 2 days later. I was in his father's study, looking for a book, when I found it. Tucked in a drawer was a picture of the three of us from a happier time, Liam at 18, his father's arms slung around his shoulders, my own smile bright and uncomplicated. I stared at our frozen, innocent faces, and the weight of what we were doing crashed down on me. I heard Liam's heavy tread in the hall. I turned, the photo held out like an accusation. "Look at this, Liam," my voice broke. "Look at us. He trusted us. He trusted me to be here for you." He froze in the doorway, his face paling. The raw hunger I'd seen in his eyes was instantly replaced by a gut-wrenching shame. "This is a betrayal," I whispered, the tears coming now. "It's not just wrong. It's a betrayal of his memory. Of the family we were supposed to be." He didn't try to argue. He just looked at the photo, then at my tear-streaked face and nodded slowly, his jaw tight. "You're right." The words were flat, final. "It is." He turned and walked away. This time, there was no dramatic exit. Just a quiet retreat into his room. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut, a sound more devastating than any outburst. For a week, we became masters of avoidance. He started leaving for work before I woke up. I started going to bed before he came home. We left notes about groceries on the counter. The few times we were in the same room, the air was so thick with regret and unsaid words it was hard to breathe. The passion had been scorched away, leaving only the bitter ashes of guilt. Then, on a Thursday night, I heard a crash from the garage. I rushed in to find him standing amidst a scattered toolbox, clutching his hand, a streak of blood welling between his fingers. A wrench lay at his feet. He'd been working on his father's old motorcycle, a project they had started together. "Let me see," I said, my nurse's instincts taking over. "It's fine," he grumbled, trying to pull away. "Liam, let me see it." He relented, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I led him to the laundry room sink and gently cleaned the cut. It was deep. As I wrapped his large, calloused hand in gauze, my fingers remembering the feel of his skin, I felt him watching me. "You were right," he said quietly, his voice rough. "About everything. I've been trying to hate you for it. I've been trying to hate myself more." I finished tying the bandage but didn't let go of his hand. I just held it, our joined hands resting on the cold porcelain of the sink. "I've been doing the same," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "But the hate, it doesn't stick. It just turns into this awful, hollow ache." His other hand came up, his fingers gently brushing a stray tear from my cheek that I hadn't even felt fall. The touch was so tender, so devoid of the previous frantic hunger, that it shattered the last of my defenses. "We can't do this," I said, even as I leaned into his touch. "I know," he whispered, his thumb stroking my cheekbone. "We'll destroy everything." "I know." His forehead came to rest against mine, a mirror of that first night. We stood there in the harsh fluorescent light of the laundry room, surrounded by the ghosts of his father and the wreckage of our good intentions, holding on to each other like the only solid thing in a collapsing world. It wasn't over. The guilt hadn't vanished. But as his arms slowly wrapped around me, pulling me into an embrace that felt like both a sin and a salvation, I knew with a terrible, certain clarity that we were going to lose this battle. We were going to choose the ache of wanting each other over the hollow ache of being apart. And there was no going back.